first of all, welcome. And as you know, there are other seminars going on, which is great. This has been an initiative by Jamie Shaw. The executives in residence have been pulled into this. Now, actually, we are very willing to do this. We've been wanting to do something like this for a long time. And so this is the right time. Most of you, I know all but one of you, actually. So for the benefit of Romeo, I will tell you, I'm an alum from Dominican. So I would have never imagined as a student of Dominican that I would be back at Dominican at some point in my life. And I love it. It's great to be back. It's like that was home for me at the time. And so now teaching courses in investments as well as personal finance and things like that is my way of getting engaged with young minds and to sort of tap into what they perceive or see in respect to these topics, which can be daunting, but at the same time, I think they're essential. So I kind of spearheaded an investment club, which obviously this semester is pretty much non-functioning because of what's going on. But we've started to get together last fall, spring ago as well, a year ago. And that will eventually get back to be on course. Anyway, I'm really a finance professional. My career is in banking, investment banking. And in the last 4 years or so, I made a huge career change and started doing advisory work on my own, sort of like a virtual or maybe an interim CFO for clients of different types. And obviously I have much more flexibility and I can spend some time at Dominican, which is great. But I know you don't want to hear about that. You're more interested in what points I can bring to you in respect to navigating your career and personal finances. So before I go there, I just want to ask you, you know, what is, oh, by the way, Jamie, I forgot to tell you, the cue was, if you want, I pretty much already know I started. So when you think about themes for songs, what comes to mind? What are the top 3-4 things in terms of themes for songs that come to mind? You listen to music, you listen to songs and the lyrics. What themes are the most popular themes?
Rhythm.
Which one?
Like the rhythm of the music.
Yeah, that's the rhythm, but themes in terms of the songs, the lyrics, the lyrics, what they say.
Love.
Love, of course. You see, you're forgetting about this one. That's it. What's another one?
Heartbreak.
Yes, that's another one. What else? Well, today we're talking about money. And guess what? Most people don't think about this, but number 2 in the category of themes for songs is money. And I just kind of put together a list of a few that I found throughout the decades. And you can see it goes back, way back. And, you know, depending on who's listening, some of them would know, recognize some songs. And for example, if you just pick one, whichever, in this case, this song, right there, you know, by Jennifer Lopez. And I don't know if you can hear, can you? Right? I Want Money is her song. And so, I mean, I can go on and on, all of these songs, but one creative one is this one. I never heard of this guy until I saw this song, Wu-Tang Clan in 1994. And his song is called Cream, which stands for Cash Rules Everything Around Me. That's it. That makes me think of how money, cash rules our lives. Unfortunately, I wish love would just rule our lives. But of course, love has a huge influence, but even with love, sometimes we can't continue without cash and money. So yeah, this is a topic that causes a lot of anxiety. It's a topic that you can notice by the nature of how many songs and theme songs that are around it, kind of gets in our system. But the part about love you can express, you can talk to people. Money, sometimes we don't. This is a taboo topic. So we typically, you know, don't deal with it. And part of it has to do because we've never really been brought up to do that. So for me, one of the ways to think about this is, let's figure out if there's a path to how money can work on your behalf, work on your side. So there are some steps I came up, and this is nothing that I'm just the only one, but most experts kind of have an approach. This is my approach. as I said, the first thing is that we're really not taught about money since childhood. So I don't know too many families that sit around the table, kitchen table, or anywhere in the house and talk about their money issues on a weekly basis, monthly basis. It's usually only talk when things are not doing well. And so, and even then, sometimes it's a hard topic to deal with. So that's the first step. The first step is to really deal with it, talk about it. So of course, you're not going to talk about this with anyone. You talk about it with the right people, right? Who are those that, first of all, who will listen? And second, people that actually will maybe not only listen, but contribute to the discussion if there's one. But then there's the idea of understanding that maybe there's a way, there's a path to walk across your own path of how do you develop your career and you progress in your career and you think about money as something that can help you, and the reason many people actually move into a career and do and seek jobs is to make a living, right? Be an income. But I'm really saying there's a path to it. And the path looks like this. And by the way, you all are somewhere in this stage or one of these stages in this path. So this is the path to financial well-being. The path is first, as a child, you're dependent on somebody, right? It doesn't matter who, but usually you cannot sustain yourself financially for a while, for a long time. And then eventually, when you start working, you reach a point where after you work and you can make enough to cover your own expenses, you can actually become solvent. Most college students reach this level really quickly. And many don't quite reach the stability level or stage. So the goal would be to think about this in stages, right? I reach solvency, then maybe I can seek stability, and then eventually the two ultimate goals would be to seek security and eventually self-sufficiency. But it's not as easy as it sounds. You would think that this is a straight path, as you can see here. It's not. You start here, maybe you get to solvency and you kind of fall back to dependency, maybe go back into solvency, kind of reach stability, aim for security, and a crisis, a recession happens, and then you're back to maybe trying to work on stability. And that's how it is. It's very hard. It really doesn't quite work in a straight line path or any other path that way. The question is then understanding how you can deal with this. And here, by the way, I want to be clear. And I really like this quote by Chris Brogan. The goal is not to have more money or to just seek money, by the way. The goal is to live life on your own terms. I really like that. And that's why you can aim for security or self-sufficiency if you think in those terms, as opposed to just about making more money or working or doing everything you do for money. But as a college student, where are you with this? What's your understanding of this, and how can I actually help you doing this? All right, the way I see it, and many experts obviously have figured it out, that your career and money, there are certain types of things that you do to achieve some earning potential. Usually, first, you start as an employee, you work for somebody. In other words, you're renting your own time, your own, space of time during the day. And many of us spend a lot of time doing this during the week. And so you become an employee. And now you work for a salary, for a paycheck. All right. But if you start exploring what other things you do in your life, maybe you can think like an entrepreneur. And maybe you can think about improving your knowledge skills so you become a specialist someday, and eventually an investor. Actually, you can become an investor right now. You could start becoming an investor right now. So the thing about these 4 quadrants, and there's a lot. I gave a talk once just about these 4 quadrants, and that was an hour and a half talk just about this 4, because there's so many things related to this. The tax rate, for example, that each on average pays. Which one do you guess is the highest tax rate for any of these, 4 quadrants? An employee, a specialist, an investor, or an entrepreneur? Which one do you think pays the highest tax rate?
The employee.
Yes, the employee. Which one pays the least, the lowest tax rate?
Investor.
Yes, the investor. All right, you already know this stuff. Great. So the idea here is to start thinking, yes, you start as an employee and working towards becoming a specialist. This is important. As a college student, you should think that there's a path. Becoming a specialist is going to be one way for you to make a great living. But also, you might have hobbies. You might do other things, which you can actually think about the entrepreneurship side as well in your life. But one you can start, as I said early on, is becoming an investor. And that starts little by little. You need patience for that, obviously. It's like planting a tree. You plant the tree, you don't see the little sprouts until a while, you water it, and eventually you start seeing the little branches, and then it takes a long time before there are leaves, and then, it starts to mature. That takes a long time. And it's the same with investing. The point is you start as soon as you can, because the longer you wait, the longer you ramp up for that tree to grow. And so, as Henry Ford said, the money is your hope for independence. If money is your hope for independence, you will never have it. The only real security that a man will have in this world is a reserve of knowledge, experience, and ability. And that is so true. And so in all these 4 quadrants, you can actually develop that knowledge. Yes, to become an investor, you'll have to know a little bit, learn a little bit. To become an entrepreneur is the same. Obviously, to become a specialist. What do I mean by a specialist? Well, a specialist is someone who gets a graduate degree in some field or becomes a specialist in a trade. For example, a plumber is a trade. It's a very specialized trade, and it's high in demand. Someone who obviously is an attorney is a specialized trade. Someone who's been doing something for a long time, maybe started, as an employee in a company, but eventually learned something and really becomes knowledgeable of that. And over the years, he or she become a specialist. So there's not one way, there's not one solution to become any of these. The only one that actually any of these can do is become an investor. So, all right, I have to talk about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room today is, I'm calling it the COVID-19 recession. I'm sure that's what everyone will call it, right? So what are we going through right now is really one of those things that it's like, we don't think about it in that sense. We don't think about this something that is going to go away at some point, but it will pass. And just like spring, just like winter, there are economic cycles. And that to understand that economic cycles don't last as long as we think they do. Now, some last longer than others. We've been 10 years in this growth mode since the last serious recession, which we had between 2008 and 2019. So yes, we've been in a mode, therefore we're spoiled. We don't sort of look at it in that sense. But recessions force us to really look at our priorities and really, evaluate them. We have to take a look at what is priority in our lives. That's one thing that recessions do. Our grandparents, whoever grew up in the 1930s, really learned that the hard way. And so, of course, the other thing is we learned that with this particular recession, it's a very pivotal moment. So the economy will change profoundly in ways that we cannot even imagine. I'm already listening to the news, what they're doing in New Zealand. New Zealand, they pretty much opened the economy because they were able to contain and pretty much be able to succeed when it comes to containing the spread of the virus thus far. And so they're opening the economy as of yesterday. And now restaurants are following the rules that are being asked to follow, which is 6 feet of distance, they have to wear masks, they have to serve this way, they have to do that. That's a totally different way in which we are experiencing, or they are experiencing being at a restaurant, for example. And so what does that tell me? That tells me, as an investor, you learn that also creates opportunities. I cannot imagine how many apps are going to be developed, how many things are going to be developed to actually be able to cater to that type of clientele or that type of service. There's opportunities out there that I'm sure are going to be evolving. So then when you think about how we engage with the global community, 2 weeks ago, I was invited at DePaul to give a Zoom talk to a class of 300 students about being a global citizen. Well, I was challenged to think about this because I've always preached, I've always felt myself, I kind of became or felt that I'm a global citizen. And being a global citizen means that you also assume the responsibility of what it means to be a global citizen. Your actions have an impact worldwide, and now we know it. It's in our face. And so I think this will also change. I don't think it's going to change in the sense that we're going to be different in that sense, or we're going to, but yes, there's going to be borders, there's going to be checks, there's going to be security. So it's going to change how we engage with the world. The one that really comes to mind is how economic literacy or financial literacy can actually hurt you. And now we are going to see in the next few months, in the next year or so, how people, because of that financial illiteracy, are going to be hurt seriously. We also are finding out that capitalism has its contradictions. It's not the perfect panacea, right? It really kind of supports or helps or really is a structure for some, the have versus the have-nots. So basically, Minsky was basically right. For those of you who are not finance or economics major, Minsky had a lot to do with the efficient market hypothesis, which has to do how investors view the markets, and they think they have all the information that they need to make a decision, and that's not the case. Anyway, but then, now what? I think the only thing we can do is a couple of things. We have to change and adapt, and that's what we're all doing. We're here because we're changing, we're adapting. And that also means learning, expanding our comfort zone. And so the other thing is, and this goes specifically to you as college students, you cannot delegate your future. And we do this by not thinking about money as such an important, aspect of our lives. And the other thing is that experts don't know everything, for sure. We've definitely learned that. And also people that say that are experts, or our government many times. So here are my 5 steps to navigate your career and your personal finances as a college student. What would I recommend? So first, keep dreaming. That's okay. You dream big. But if you follow at least something, maybe the steps, and you stay focused on this, with the idea of learning and changing, is what will really help you, I think. The first step is you need to really, really evaluate your relationship with money. By this, I mean how money flows in your life. I'll give you a little tip of how to do that. This is a more extensive topic. Actually, I have some podcasts that I've been doing for a while on this topic, because it's one that you really need to embrace first, because you can get to the other ones, but if this one is one that you haven't quite understood in your life, it's hard to get to the other ones and develop the right habits. But anyway, having said that, there's ways to simply start a change in that. The other one is you must check whether you have or not, or start an emergency fund. It's important. We're seeing, this goes back to the financial literacy aspect, right? It's important to have an emergency fund. When you take a flight, which now we can't, flight attendants and the crew will tell you that you need to put your mask in case oxygen drops because of whatever reason, and you have to put your lifesaver, stuff like that. Well, that's your emergency fund, and now we might need it. So that's why this is important. Actually, it's interesting, but during recessions usually is when people start really setting up an emergency fund for the various reasons, when ideally you should have done this before, right? But it's never too late. The third step is to really have a starting point, and we'll talk about that. And then once you have a starting point, then you have goals. What's my goal, right? But you cannot determine your goal until you know where you are today. And so we have to look at that. The fourth one is you really have to take a look at your spending, right? And the spending here, because your source of income derives out of whether you're employed or an entrepreneur or specialist or an investor, or all the 4 ideally. And then how you spend that money. And the clue here is you don't spend more than what you make, obviously. The 5th step, number 5 is my favorite number. And so I always say, pay yourself first. We usually have more month at the end of the month to pay all our expenses, instead of really being the reverse. We don't pay ourselves usually. That's, by the way, 86% of the population. So I'm not saying you, I'm just saying the population in general. So what do I mean by pay yourself first? Well, you invest. You invest for yourself, for the future. You do that, because if you're not doing that, it's going to come sooner than you think, and then you will have missed on opportunities to having had your money grow. So basically, you sometimes have to take 2 steps back to take 10 forward. That's what Nipsey Hussle said at one point, and I kind of like that quote because it's so true. And these are the steps. And as I said, you might take 1 step, 2, and then you'll be back to the first step. That's okay. You move again, and you get to the 3rd and the 4th, and maybe you drop back to the 2nd step. That's okay. You're moving forward because you're moving. Even if it's going back 1 or 2, you're moving. You're not stuck somewhere where nothing is happening. All right, so what's your starting point? From a finance perspective, this is your starting point. This is how you do your check. When you go to the doctor, they check your blood pressure. They check your pulse. They check your, temperature. They want to know where you're at that point in time. And they want to tell you if you're sick, that, a month from now, this is where we want you to be. Well, they might not tell you that, but they might say, if they prescribe a medication, they'll say, at that point, we'll check you again. And they're going to check this. So from a finance perspective, you need to check that. This is how you do that. You sum up all your assets, everything that is worth anything that, has a value. By the way, an asset is something that provides value or income to you. If it doesn't, it's not, all right? So then you sum up all your liabilities. Your liabilities are all your debts, your credit card debt, mortgage, anything you owe, that's a liability. And then you see where you're at. Now, the sum of your liabilities should be less than your assets, obviously. If it's more, which can happen, by the way, when I was a college student, yes, my liabilities were more than my assets for sure. But then once I figured it out, I had a plan how to cut that to get to the point where that net worth figure was going to be the one that had to grow. That became my goal. And so what you do here, you see that your assets equals the sum of liabilities by net worth is basically the formula. You're saying, let's take your assets, take all the liabilities, see what we're left with. That's your starting point. And if this is negative, that's okay, because now you know where you're at. And then you can work towards improving that a year from now, 2 years from now. As I said, the topic of finance is for the ones that have patience. This does not happen over the course of a few months, over the course of only a year or two. This takes time, but that's okay. It's like a tree, right? I hope you like how trees grow. And if you think of how trees grow and eventually what they provide us with, maybe fruits, flowers, leaves, all that, it's there in the future. You just have to think about it in those terms. So that's your starting point for one of the steps that I mentioned. And so then the next one, that's another practical guide here. You need to evaluate how you spend your money. All right, so the typical way that every accountant will tell you is you need to know how much your income is, right? You need to see what that is and then what your expenses are. So in other words, what they're telling you is you need to figure out what you're spending on. And so by that, you know what your fixed expenses are and your variable expenses, and that's your net income. And then maybe you should invest this money. I don't agree. I think you should pay yourself first, deduct from the top, invest it first, then live with what you can. But this doesn't quite work. Most people don't put together a budget. Every financial advisor will tell you, let's put a budget together. They have to do that because there's actually even a regulation that as a financial advisor, you have to help your client put a budget together. The budget is not going to even be open, looked at by your client typically, unless it's a business. A business, yes, they do address looking and having a budget. So, and what I'm saying here from that perspective, ideally, you run your life like a business, but who does that? Not too many people do that. So here's an alternative. Okay, fine. You know where your income comes from, and it could come from your employment salary, it could come from business maybe, or investment income ideally. And if it only as a college student you have this one, you'll work towards getting this one and that one in the future. Now you know that. But what I'm going to propose that instead of looking at what you spend on, you look at what activities you're spending on, right? I've just changed the what you spend on what activities. Just one word. To me, there are necessary activities and unnecessary activities. Pretty obvious, instead of fixed expenses and variable expenses. Okay, how do you look at this? So necessary activities are definitely things that you have to spend to make sure that you have heat at home and you have water, all that. Those are necessary. But I would still look at those and see deficiencies within those. Because, for example, ComEd will come to your house, do an audit for free, and they will save you money by telling you this is what you need to change, and here are some free bulbs. I've been able to save $17 a month for now, 3 years now, every month, and that's money I can invest. So you can do things like this to change those and lower the cost of those necessary activities. But it's the unnecessary activities, the ones that get you, right? By no means I'm criticizing anyone who likes this expensive coffees, by the way, not at all. I'm a coffee drinker myself. But I remember being in the banking business, we worked stressful jobs, we had long hours, and so many times it was great to run out, and get a nice coffee or after work for drinks or a nice expensive dinner. That's great. It's wonderful. But that became sort of the way we kind of coped with our stress. And so guess what? When you start to cope with something, you become addicted to it, and you start dining and eating out and doing this. And I'm using this as an example, by the way. I'm the first one to admit that I love to do that. But when it becomes sort of a thing that drags, your finances, which can happen, that's when you realize this might be unnecessary. And you can do other things. As a matter of fact, this recession is forcing us to learn to cook different things that maybe we haven't done in the past. And so we figure out we can do this. And so there might be other examples of unnecessary activities. Maybe the one I picked was not the right one, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but there are some unnecessary activities that we're doing. And the moment you start looking at things as activities, and the reason I call it an activity is because if it becomes a coping activity, that's an unnecessary activity. If I'm coping by going out with friends and drinking out because of that, that's an unnecessary activity necessary. Obviously, you'll be left with some level of a net income, but it's going to help you figure out that this could actually be a higher figure if you just look at what you spend on. Right. This takes more discipline than anything to really do this. And it's working on this second part, not so much on the others, because the others, obviously, you can work on how do I get more of this? Well, I would suggest become an investor, start investing, but that's going to take some time until it gives you fruits. Obviously, you can be an entrepreneur. You can have a little side business too, right? Anyway, so those are the types of things that will help you in terms of techniques. I'll leave it out so you can see that. Okay, so now we've done that. So I've talked so much about investing that I figured may as well talk about this. And I better erase this for now. And so there are different ways to invest. And nowadays, investing has become so easy, so easy. I remember when I was in college, my second summer, when I decided I'm going to be investing and started learning about this, I had to work a whole summer to make my $1,500 so that I could open my investment account with Merrill Lynch. That's not the case anymore. You can put $5 in Robinhood or N1 or Acorn and you're set to go, right? So these are the top 10 apps that are, first of all, the first 5 are no fee. The other 5, depending on how you use them, have or don't have a fee, but their fees are minimum. ETrade has moved to become a no fee with exceptions. There's certain types of investments that they charge a fee. Acorns, that has, if you use the free app, it's really to learn, but if you start investing, they charge you $1 a month. That's not so bad at all. And so if you notice, these are all relatively new. By that I mean in the last maybe 10 years, because, for example, Vanguard and Charles Schwab have been on for years, for decades. But they've come on board on becoming and getting their platforms to be really, not only free, but really very useful. By the way, there's great information in the collegeinvestor.com for college students to learn about investing and to be able to learn more about managing your money. So all of these, by the way, are very easy to use. Out of all of them, yes, they do require that you learn a little bit about the types of investment asset classes, but there's one. This is the one that if you really don't know anything and you don't really care to learn all this stuff that much, but you want some money for you to grow, that's Acorn. Acorn is very innovative, and that's the Acorns with an S, by the way. The Acorn without an S is a shoe place that you can buy shoes, but it's Acorns. And Acorns really has that mindset of a tree. I've never been someone who's a spokesman for this. I talk about trees. I've always said that because my grandfather used to say that. Investment is like growing a tree. But Acorns, maybe that's how they thought about it. So it's an acorn that helps you, and you put your acorns for that tree to grow. By the way, I picked a couple to just explain to you the no-fee circumstance that I'm talking about. All of these platforms obviously can be used online via iPhones or Samsung phones, smartphones. N1 Finance is beautiful. It's one of the best apps to learn about investing. So really, it allows for the one that doesn't want to learn that much. You can select what they call in pies, which are really investment portfolios. And then if you want, you can actually select securities by doing a little more of analysis, and then you learn. So this is one, as a matter of fact, I use this in my class. My investment class, all my students are supposed to invest. And at the end of the semester, we kind of evaluate where they are, and they learn how to invest hands-on. They invest $20 each. And so You can do pretty much everything. It's limited to taxable and IRAs. They don't, at this time, at least, offer all the types of accounts. Taxable is basically a brokerage account, but they have no commissions, no monthly fees. The minimum investment is $100. Yes, my students pool their $20, 5 students in a team, and they invest $100. And so they don't necessarily have promotions. Sometimes they do, in which, you could get a promotion and then you can invite 5 friends, and the 5 friends invest and they get, $20 as a bonus, and you get a little $5 or stuff like that. They every so often have it. There is an ETF, or I should say, what used to be a mutual fund, but has become an ETF. It's wonderful, Vanguard. They are specialized in ETFs. And ETFs is like a mutual fund. It's called Exchange Traded Fund. And what they do is they specialize in indices, industries. That's an easy way to invest as well. Here, you do have to know your asset allocation a little bit. But it's very expansive, because if you have all the types of accounts like 401k or so, yes, you can also move them there, which M1 doesn't have. So in essence, when you look at this, Fidelity, ETrade, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, they all offer full services. M1, Acorns, and Webull and Stash are more like apps that don't necessarily offer all services, but enough to do and be an investor. ETrade offers everything. So, they are all depending on where you are, what you want to do. Robinhood, about, let's say, just about a year ago, they went and kind of became an innovator in the industry. They started charging 0 fees, and that's when everyone moved. ETrade moved in September. Acorns was already the $1 fee, so that they didn't change. Stash, Webull, they all, even Vanguard, went on and became no fees. They're making enough money from your cash being invested anyway, so they don't need to charge you fees. So, okay, here's a sample of how M1 looks. It's pretty easy. You select a pie, you select your portfolio, and then you can manage it. And so you can learn along the way. You can actually select pies that are predefined for you. They call them pies. It's a portfolio. You might need to, learn a little bit about the terminology, but other than that, you will pretty easily be able to manage. ETrade obviously gives you so much more information. This is for the more serious investor where he's trying to learn more about valuing companies and get lots of data. But they do have the technology to always support you from a platform that is very, very useful. So if you're a small investor at this point, I would recommend take a look at Robinhood, M1, Stash, Acorns for sure. And then eventually you might move to ETrade. And then, of course, as I said, Acorn. I cannot speak, I don't have enough words to describe how easy this app is. I've suggested to my nieces, they're using it. It's so easy. But there's one thing that they've been an innovator in, and now a lot of apps are going to follow this. You notice there's a little card behind that phone. It's because you can link it to any account, whether it's a credit card, a bank account, anything that where you move money to or from, and it'll round up money for you, and it'll invest that little money that it's rounding up. For example, let's say I want to go to Walgreens, pay with my debit card or my credit card that is linked to this Acorns account, and I pay, let's say, $5.56 for something. Well, that's what the charge is in my debit card. As long as I have my card registered with Acorns, Acorns will round up that amount to $6, and it will invest the difference, which in this case, it would be, 47 cents? And so as you're using your cash or your credit card, debit card, you're starting to invest without even thinking. So by the end of the month, you all of a sudden have invested $30, $40, $50 in all this rounding in little cents. So your money kind of grows and without you even realizing. And the nice thing is you don't have to really be an expert in investing. You just choose your risk, which is very conservative, moderate, or maybe very aggressive. You just need to decide that. When you have a small amount, you can take an aggressive risk. As a matter of fact, right now, there's so many great opportunities because the market is down in many sectors that a lot of stocks are cheap. They're trading at a discount. So I know investing is not for everyone. But if you're thinking long-term and you're thinking about paying for yourself first, then you kind of have to incorporate as part of your strategy. All right, at this point, we'll stop and see if there are any questions, or feedback in respect to what I've talked about.
Yeah, in terms of investing, well, depending on the recession, which sectors do you recommend we invest on?
The nice thing about recessions, that sounds awful, but is that it creates opportunities, right? There are, if you think about this particular recession, it's creating opportunities in very specific sectors, such as anything that has to do with consumer staples. Consumer staples right now, think about it. You go into the store, we're all buying stuff, right? And so there are companies that trade in this, Kimberly-Clark, Conagra. I mean, there's a ton. It would be easier to even just choose an ETF that invests in that sector. Other sector is technology, information technology. Here we're using a platform that has become so popular because of its technology. So everything related to this type of technology right now are doing well, right? All the technology companies, because you need more routers, more servers, Ethernet connections. You not only need the hardware, but the software. Huge sectors for this particular recession. Another sector is healthcare, specifically when it comes to the development of new technologies that are for not only the virus, but sicknesses, anything that is related to healthcare. Healthcare is a sector that right now is being impacted tremendously. And obviously the companies that are larger are able to sustain, have to sell, they are moving into developing different testing methods, vaccines, great opportunities. And a fourth one that you might not think about, but is utilities. Utilities related to energy is something we all need. We all need electricity. We all need gas. And whether we are in a recession or not, they tend to do well, as a matter of fact. So they are kind of, those four sectors are the ones that I think, that I know in this recession are the ones that will be doing okay. I will get out of other sectors that are not doing so well. And for example, hospitality, if you talk about some sectors of energy like oil and all of those, they are not doing well at all. Car industry, I mean, there's a bunch. So the point here is to really have a diversified portfolio, because that will stand the test of time. So if you're diversified, it doesn't matter if there's a recession or not, it will withstand that time. Yes, because if you continue investing, you invest on a regular basis, you will be buying stocks on an average at a lower price that when there are highs, and a little bit higher than where there are lows, but you're buying also at the lows. So that's called cost averaging. That is also a technique that works over the long time. I don't know if that gives you a whole answer, but it gives you an idea, at least what things to look for ETFs, what things to ask, or at least to ask the right questions for the people that, have these instruments or are talking about them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Ramiro, could you go
Yes.
back to the slide where you were showing the 5 steps?
Yes.
I think I just have a couple questions about those.
All right.
I started listening to your podcast, and I think I watched the first one. But I'm still a little confused about your relationship with money, because we're friends, or what do you mean with your relationship with money?
All right. So yes, that's kind of in a rhetorical sense. If I think about this, let's say if you have a neighbor and one day the neighbor just brushes you off in the wrong way, now you kind of get the sense that, this neighbor doesn't like you. The next time you see him, you kind of don't say hi. He or she doesn't say hi. Now you don't have a good relationship with that neighbor. Now it's kind of each one on their own. This is the kind of relationship we tend to have with money. We don't talk about it. So yes, money is not a person, but we cannot many times just talk about it. How many people really sit down and talk about it? I'm talking about families. I'm not talking about, you talk to your friends or you talk to everybody. I'm saying families many times don't talk about money. Parents don't teach their kids about money. It's because they didn't learn. So this is a huge deficiency actually in the developed economies, particularly in the United States. We're so consumer oriented that we don't really teach at an early age how to manage your money, and it should be a healthy relationship. That's what I mean. You want to have a relationship where it's okay, I can deal with this, I can deal with that. And what happens is many people don't ask for help. And so, if you let time go by, you're not asking for help, it gets worse, right? If let's say you have credit card debt, students are, by the way, big at that. They accumulate credit card debt. They don't seek help. They don't know how to pay it back. And then by the time they're trying to seek help, it's maybe kind of late, maybe not completely late, but it's even harder, a harder thing to deal with because now your balance has creeped up. How? Because we don't understand one basic concept from finance, and that's a compounding of money. Interest rates compound any money, depending on, how much time you're talking about. So you're paying interest over interest over interest over interest. So it compounds the effect. And that's why credit cards make lots of money, right? Because first of all, they have very high rates and they calculate their interest rate. You know that for credit cards, the average credit card charges you for 13 months of interest rate as opposed to 12. We all think in 12-month years, not in 13. They do the calculation. Read your statement in your credit card. It'll tell you, every 25 days we calculate interest rate. All right. You better know that so that you can actually accelerate and accept that and understand. So the relationship with money has to do with about learning about money and also being open about it and really understanding how money flows in your life, such as what I said earlier, right? If you look at it from the activities, it's necessary, is it unnecessary? If you just do that in your mind, okay, is this necessary, is it unnecessary? You can start to see this differently as opposed to, oh, I need this.
Okay.
I hope that.
Another question that I had
yes.
was on the emergency fund.
Yes.
So I don't have one. And I think it's the same thing as saving, as creating an emergency fund.
Yes.
Or
yeah, the word saving, right? You're saving, but the difference is that you're saving in case something serious happens. Ideally, you want to build a 3 to 6 month, 3 months at least, and maybe 6 months. Because if you think about it, somebody, when they lose their job, it takes on average 3, in a recession, maybe more, maybe 5 or 6 months to find a job. So your emergency fund is going to be that pool of money that will help you at least pay the fixed expenses, the things that are necessary, until you get a new job. And of course, that's when a lot of people find themselves that, they tap into a credit card, or they tap into debt because they don't have an emergency fund. So that's why this is one of those that is important to think about. Actually, businesses think about this. Small businesses are, the reason many small businesses will disappear, obviously, is because this recession is being brutal to them. But for the ones that didn't have this particular, cash, let's say, level of support in which they could actually afford to, go a little bit further, they're going to be the first ones that are being hit. They are already being hit. And it's the same for individuals and families.
And how do you exactly start one? Like, I have heard a lot of people that is like, well, like 60% of your paycheck should go to your savings account, or. So
the way I think about this, what gives you peace of mind, right? That's what you have to start with. What gives you peace of mind is if you can put, I don't know, $20, $25 this month, $100. But the goal is that, let's say by the end of the year, I'll have $1,000 right there as an emergency fund. I'm not going to get there as a student to 1,000 in a month or two, but it's realistic to think more in a few months. I'll be there. And once you have it, then it should be invested in something very safe, treasuries or something like that. And then it's there in case something happens. And by the way, emergencies are going to happen. You get into an accident, some healthcare issue, or your car needs this. That's what you can pull in, and it's right to use it, and then you replenish it. Once you have that, you start building that peace of mind, which allows your mind to free yourself of that worry and move on to the other things.
So your emergency fund doesn't necessarily have to be like a savings account that is just sitting there. It just has to be a liquid asset.
It has to be a liquid asset. Now, it could be a savings account because as long as you can tap into it. The thing about savings accounts, they don't pay much in interest rates right now. So may as well put it in a brokerage account. So it's maybe earning treasuries at least or something like that, right? And then you move some money to start investing more aggressively. That'd be your long-term investment pool or fund.
Okay, makes sense.
This is all by little steps, starts with little steps.
Thank you.
All right. One more
Ramiro,
question.
Can I ask you one question? Yeah, yes. I do. Talk about the cryptocurrency. Yes. And who does it? I mean, you hear about it, but I can't even imagine.
Cryptocurrency actually is a very interesting thing that has been evolving for a few years now. Since 2012, eventually in 2015 went on, and it became pretty big in 2016, and 17 was the year. And then in 2018, it kind of, lost its cachet, and in 2018 kind of tried to come back at the beginning, as you see, at the end of the year. But right now, it's one of the most stable ones. It's not really fluctuating like it's fluctuating like with the market. So, by the way, I've been watching this since 2016. Like I like to watch all opportunities that are out there, right? Like cannabis, stocks, and all those. But cryptocurrency, whether we like it or not, it's a matter of time. And that could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, maybe 15 years. Economies are going to start accepting digital currency. There are countries out there already like Sweden or Denmark, which have moved so much forward in terms of where they are today in accepting digital currencies. Particularly cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin have been already accepted in countries like Japan, South Korea, where they made a formal acceptance to that is a tradable currency. And there's been countries that have completely opposed it. The United States hasn't quite done that. It's in neutral. It's either not yes, not no. But there's certain things that have already happened. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of 2018, the CBOE, which is the Chicago Board of Options Exchange, issued for the first time a futures contract on Bitcoin, which means you can buy now futures in Bitcoin, in addition to obviously buying Bitcoin or all this other Ethereum, lithium, all these other currencies. But why is that significant? Because it kind of went to the SEC. The SEC had to either approve or reject that. Of course, the SEC took 6 months, but they approved it in December. And that's why the CBOE was able to launch the first futures contract in Bitcoin. It's significant because now we have a regulator in the United States accepting that can be actually a tradable security, an instrument that can be traded. And that, obviously, that was one of the best years for, cryptocurrency in 2018. Oh, sorry, the early part of 18 and the late part of 17. So to me, it's a matter of time. As soon as a regulator, a central bank, and by the way, the Central Bank of China has just approved within the last couple of weeks that they will be trading and putting some of their reserves and using cryptocurrency. So as we see this, that's why to me, this is a question of, I don't know if it's 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years, or maybe sooner. I don't know. But digital currencies are here to stay. We're already using Apple Pay. We're using already other ways of currency that are digital. Most of us already use credit cards in which they have a chip, and that's pretty much digital. It's just an older way of doing the digital approach. So Sweden was an innovator that in the 1990s, they forced every employer to pay their employees digitally, no longer with cash. And so it's there. It's a question once governments decide to do this. Of course, the other side of the coin is there might be governments that are totally opposed. If the United States were to say, the Fed were to say tomorrow that they completely do not want to deal with cryptocurrency, yes, that would pretty much shut the market for cryptocurrency in the US. Maybe might be supported in worldwide, but the fact that some central banks have already allowed it, it's going to be much harder to not do that.
What about fraud? I mean, how do you guard against fraud with that?
Yes, fraud is a big if, obviously there. But the other thing is cryptocurrency is safer than money in the sense that it's unique to one user because it has a very specific key that the user has to have. So it's electronic. So if you have that, unless someone has access to that, right now, it's pretty hard to really break that. And it's because it's also stored in just the cloud and all that, it's much harder to really hack into it. The bigger deal is more in the transactions that are being, what it's being used for. That's the bigger deal. I think that's the potential for not only fraud, but also to expand, fraudulent types of transactions. So the fraud is not going to be necessarily the currency itself, but it's going to be what it's used for. That's what I think from my research, what I've been looking at. But it's fascinating, and eventually it'll be done. By the way, there are ETFs. Just because there's a new contract since 2018, futures contract, there's been a number of ETFs that have come out. There's ETFs on specific currencies, multi-currencies, cryptocurrencies. There's all kinds now. So you can actually buy ETFs with cryptocurrencies. And they've been doing okay. I mean, the year was, in 2018, they did well, not so much in 19. This year, they're okay, but, it's there. Hope that answers your
Thank
question.
you. It answered mine. You're a smart guy, Ramiro.
I don't know. Okay, so any more? Okay, so I think, by the way, this is not the approach. This is just one approach. There's whatever works for you is what's important here. But as long as you develop one thing, I call it rituals. Sorry, but it might be actually, habits. The more you can have habits about money, the easier it's going to be. And of course, the first habit should be pay yourself first, right? So if you're putting some money out for the future, think about that in the future is going to be bigger than what it is today, right? So investing is the way to do that. As far as spending, if you ask the habit of, is it necessary, is it not necessary? If I ask my question that, how necessary is it? Then it's easier, right? To make the decision and say, oh, it's not that necessary. We are actually confronted with that right now. We're realizing that so many things are not as necessary as we thought they were. All right, well, okay, I'll leave you with this. But in essence, the last thing I'll say is that, and I put it at the end in a little quote, I like this quote a lot because I think it's opportune for the times that are coming based on this, pivotal moment that is the COVID-19 recession. And this is by Mahatma Gandhi, who said there are 7 things that will destroy us. 1 is wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, religion without sacrifice, politics without principle, science without humanity, business without ethics. And goes on along the Caritas Veritas that we all have learned at Dominican, that we actually learn probably at home, but at Dominican is emphasized. So if you start from there, and you consider that, yes, you can actually be part of this world as a global citizen, but considering that it's important to at least be somewhat literate about how you manage your money, it'll make a huge difference in your future. All right, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramiro.
You're the bomb, Ramiro. Awesome.
That was awesome.
It was really great. Really great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
That was wonderful. So make sure you reach out to Ramiro if you have any follow-up questions. You, of course, can schedule an appointment with him still on Handshake. Under resources, under Career Center, you can schedule an appointment with Ramiro there. But this was really, really interesting. So I appreciate you taking the time, Ramiro, to talk to us all about things related to careers and finance. Make sure you join us for our other webinars that are coming up. So we still have a few more left. They're under the events on Handshake. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. This was awesome.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jamie.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.